I never imagined I'd see bulldozers rolling down my driveway the same day I showed up with paint cans and blueprints ready to start a new chapter of my life. I had just bought an abandoned lake mansion sitting at the edge of Cedar Ridge Lake, a quiet piece of heaven surrounded by pine trees and misty hills. The place had been empty for almost a decade, but when I saw the listing, something in me said it was worth saving. The cracked windows, the fallen shutters, the overgrown ivy, it all felt like a place that just needed someone to care again. I pulled up that morning with my truck filled with supplies. My contractor buddy Mason followed behind me, his old Chevy rattling over the dirt road. We were laughing about how this place would look once the renovations were done. The dream was simple: fix it up, live here in peace, maybe rent part of it out for events, weddings, lake vibes. But then I saw dust rising from the other side of the property, the kind of dust that doesn't just float in the air, it rolls thick like smoke. I frowned, stepped out of the truck and froze. Right there on my lawn, 3 bulldozers were chewing through my fence. The lakefront view I had fallen in love with was being eaten alive by heavy machinery. Mason stopped next to me. What the hell, man, who's tearing your house down? That's when I saw them, 4 people in matching navy polos holding clipboards, standing like they owned the place, HOA badges pinned to their chests. You have got to be kidding me. One of them, a tall woman with short hair and sunglasses, stepped forward. Her expression had that cold I'm in charge look I had seen on way too many power-hungry neighbors in my life. Excuse me, what are you doing to my property? I shouted, walking toward her. She raised a hand like she was swatting a fly. Sir, please step back. This structure has been deemed unsafe. The HOA board approved immediate demolition for community safety. HOA board, I repeated. The laugh that came out was half disbelief, half anger. You're demolishing my property. I literally bought this place 2 weeks ago. Her sunglasses reflected the bulldozers moving in closer to the mansion. If you bought it, you should have checked the notices. The property was under review for structural hazards. We posted warnings. I blinked, trying to process it. I hadn't seen any notices. No one told me a thing. The sale went through clean. I had paperwork proving I was the legal owner. I pulled the folder from my truck and waved it in her face. You can't do this. I own this land. This mansion is mine. She didn't even look at the papers. She just smiled, that sharp, smug smile that only someone with too much fake power can give. Sir, the HOA doesn't need your approval when community safety is at risk. Now please step back for your own protection. That's when Mason muttered under his breath, oh, she's one of those. I was about to speak when the loud crunch of stone filled the air. The bulldozer's metal claw ripped into the mansion's side wall. A rain of bricks fell like a waterfall. My chest tightened. That was my home. Hey, stop that! I screamed, running toward the machine, but 2 HOA men stepped in front of me, hands raised like security guards. Sir, you're trespassing, one of them said flatly. Trespassing on my own land. I looked around. The neighbors from the nearby houses had started gathering, phones out, cameras rolling. They weren't here to help, they were watching like it was free entertainment. I turned back to the woman who gave you authority to do this. She finally looked at me without her shades. I did. I'm Karen Hollings, president of the Cedar Ridge HOA. Of course her name was Karen. I clenched my fists, trying not to lose it. You can't demolish private property without legal approval. You're going to pay for this. She smirked. Oh honey, we already got approval from the county inspector, and since you didn't show up to the hearing, we assumed abandonment. Hearing? What hearing? I never got any notice. Mason stepped in. Hold up, you mean to tell me you decided to tear down a house because no one answered your imaginary meeting invite? Karen crossed her arms. Sir, if you don't remove yourself from this worksite, we'll have to call law enforcement. Call them, I said. Go ahead, because when they get here you're going to be the ones in handcuffs. I took my phone out, started recording. The camera shook in my hands as the bulldozer clawed again into the porch, tearing through the wood beams. Karen frowned at the sight of me filming. You're obstructing official HOA operations. Official? You mean illegal operations? That's when a voice behind me said, excuse me, sir. I turned around. A sheriff's deputy stood by his car, lights flashing red and blue. Karen smiled wide like a snake that just saw a mouse walk into its mouth. Thank you for coming, officer, she said. This man is interfering with authorized demolition orders. The deputy walked over, looking at both of us. Let's slow down. What's happening here? I handed him my papers. They're tearing down my house. I'm the new owner, just bought it 2 weeks ago. I have proof, title deed and all. Karen snorted. You can't just buy condemned property and expect to stop a scheduled demolition. The deputy looked at the papers for a long second, then he turned to her. You said you had county authorization, right? Yes, of course we do, she said confidently. Then her eyes flickered for just a second to the man behind her. The deputy nodded. Mind if I see the paperwork? Karen hesitated. That's confidential HOA material. He raised an eyebrow. Confidential demolition orders? I don't think that's how this works, ma'am. Mason whispered to me. Oh, she's screwed now. Karen's fake confidence started to crack. I could see the sweat forming along her hairline. The other HOA members shuffled nervously behind her. Finally she said, I can get them from our office, but in the meantime work has to continue. No ma'am, the deputy said firmly. Work stops right now. The bulldozers halted. The rumbling died down. I let out a shaky breath, finally feeling like I could breathe again. Karen looked furious. Officer, you're overstepping. This is HOA jurisdiction. Not anymore, he said. This property belongs to him now, and until county paperwork proves otherwise your crew's not touching another brick. She glared at me, her jaw tight. You think you've won? No, I said calmly, I know I have. The deputy told her to clear the area until further review. She stormed off with her clipboard, whispering something to the others. As the bulldozers drove off, Mason slapped my shoulder. Well, man, looks like your fixer-upper adventure just got a whole lot more interesting. I nodded, staring at the half-destroyed mansion. A part of it was gone forever. The front porch lay in pieces, the walls exposed, but I wasn't done, not by a long shot. That night I sat by the lake watching the reflection of the ruined house in the dark water. My dream home was barely standing, but something inside me said this fight wasn't over. I was going to find out exactly how the HOA got permission, who signed what, and why they were so eager to erase this place from the map. Because something about Karen's reaction told me this wasn't about safety, it was personal. And when I found out why, they'd wish they had never touched a single brick of my mansion. I woke up the next morning to the smell of damp wood and sawdust. The house looked worse than I remembered. Half the porch was gone, a chunk of the living room wall had collapsed during the chaos, and everything smelled like dirt and rain. I sat on the tailgate of my truck sipping black coffee, staring at what used to be the dream I bought into. Mason showed up early, still wearing that same dusty cap from yesterday. You sure you want to keep this place, man? He asked. It's gonna take a miracle to fix. I nodded. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm not letting them win. He grinned. I figured you'd say that. I spent the next few hours cleaning up debris, trying to salvage what was left. The sound of birds mixed with the soft lapping of the lake water. The peace almost made me forget about Karen and her goons, but not for long. By noon a county truck pulled into my driveway. 2 inspectors stepped out, one older man with gray hair and one young woman holding a tablet. They looked around the property, their expressions serious. You the owner? The older man asked. Yeah, just bought it, I said, holding up my paperwork again. He nodded slowly. Well, Mr. Parker, looks like you got yourself tangled in some HOA mess. They filed demolition approval under community hazard claims. Community hazard, I repeated. What's that even mean? He shrugged. Usually that's used for properties with structural collapse risk, contamination, or fire hazard, but your place doesn't qualify for any of that from what I see here. He gestured toward the half-demolished structure. So they lied, I said flatly. He looked uncomfortable. Can't say for sure till we pull the official records, but it's suspicious for sure. We'll put a hold on the demolition until it's reviewed. I thanked him and they left. Mason leaned against the truck. I don't like that look, man. You're thinking something stupid, aren't you? I grinned. Maybe. That night I grabbed my flashlight and started walking around the property again. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm and still. I noticed something strange by the edge of the dock, a line of stakes sticking out of the ground like someone had marked sections of land with orange paint. I crouched down and saw letters painted on one of the stakes, CRHD. I took a picture of it. Mason was right behind me, reading over my shoulder. What do you think that stands for? No idea, I said, but it doesn't look random. We followed the stakes deeper along the shoreline. They stretched almost 100 yards around the lake until they disappeared into the woods, and the weird part was each stake had the same code, CRHD. It was almost midnight when we reached a fenced area behind the trees. The fence had fresh padlocks, shiny new ones, definitely installed recently. Mason raised an eyebrow. Think that's HOA property? Only one way to find out, I said. We went around the side and found a gap where the ground had shifted. We squeezed through, careful not to make noise. Inside the fenced area were piles of construction materials, concrete bags, pipes, and steel rods, all covered with tarps. Mason lifted one corner and whistled. Someone's been planning a big project here. I looked closer. A blueprint rolled up under a bucket caught my eye. I unrolled it under my flashlight beam. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a demolition plan, it was a development map, a massive new lakeside complex labeled Cedar Ridge Horizon District. That's what CRHD stood for. Mason looked at me shocked. They're trying to build luxury condos here, man, right on top of your mansion land. It hit me all at once. The fake hazard claim, the sudden demolition. The HOA wasn't protecting the community, they were clearing space for profit. I clenched my jaw. Those bastards. We packed up quietly and left the site, but my mind was racing. If they were building illegally, they had to have someone inside the county helping them, someone who pushed fake approvals through. The next morning I drove down to the county office. The clerk recognized the property instantly. Oh, Cedar Ridge, that file's been moving a lot lately, she said, flipping through folders. I frowned. Moving a lot? What do you mean? She looked up nervously. Well, the demolition request was pushed fast, like within 24 hours. That's not normal, it usually takes weeks. Who signed it? I asked. She glanced around, then turned the folder so I could see the signature at the bottom, read K. Hollings, HOA President, with a secondary approval stamp from County Officer L. Greer. I smiled slightly. Gotcha. I left the office and called Mason. Meet me at the diner in 20 minutes, we've got a name. He was already sitting at the booth when I arrived. I slammed the folder on the table, pointing to the name. See that, County Officer L. Greer, that's our link. She's the one who greenlit the demolition without due process. Mason grinned. So we pay her a visit. Exactly. That afternoon we drove to the county inspector's office. Lillian Greer turned out to be a middle-aged woman with a calm face and tired eyes. When I mentioned my property, her expression immediately tightened. I said politely, "Ms. Greer, I'm trying to understand how my house got approved for demolition so fast without inspection." She sighed. "I can't discuss pending investigations." "So there's an investigation," I said, raising an eyebrow. She froze. "You didn't hear that from me?" Her voice dropped lower. "Look, I didn't sign that willingly. The HOA pressured my office. They came with some document from a private developer. They said the land was already sold for redevelopment. I tried to delay it, but they had signatures from higher up." "Higher up? Who exactly?" She hesitated again. "If I talk about that, I'll lose my job." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Then let me lose mine first. I've already lost my house." She looked at me for a long time, then she said quietly, "The developer's name is Ridgeway Holdings. They're behind several HOA buyouts across the state. The Cedar Ridge HOA is one of their partners, and Karen Hollings, she's not just the president, she's part owner." The words hit like a hammer. Part owner, so this was never about community safety or some structural hazard. This was business, a land grab wrapped in fake paperwork. I thanked her and left before I could even start my truck. Mason looked at me. "Well," I said through clenched teeth, "they're building condos. They planned it months ago, and Karen's getting paid for every property she forces out." He nodded. "That explains why they're rushing demolition on yours. You're sitting on prime lakefront." "Exactly, but not anymore," I said. "They messed with the wrong guy." That evening I called a lawyer, a tough older guy named Dalton who had helped my dad years ago. He listened carefully, then laughed over the phone. "Son, you've got a solid case. They violated due process, trespassed, and caused property damage. We can sue them and the developer both." I grinned. "How soon can we start?" He chuckled. "Tomorrow morning." But I wasn't done waiting for court. I wanted proof, undeniable proof, that the HOA was illegally working with Ridgeway Holdings. So that night Mason and I returned to the fenced site again, but this time with cameras. We hid behind the trees watching as workers arrived just before dawn. They unloaded heavy machinery and began digging near the lake edge. One of them opened a file with Ridgeway Holdings logo clear as day. We captured everything: video, photos, even the permit stickers that didn't match county format. At one point I saw Karen herself step out of an SUV. She looked furious, pacing around, barking orders at the crew. She kept saying they had to finish foundation work before sunrise, before anyone noticed. "Too late for that," I whispered, recording every word. The next day we met Dalton at his office, showed him everything. He looked impressed. "Son, this is gold. You not only have them for illegal demolition, you've got environmental violations too. That lake's protected property." That night I sat on my truck hood staring at the mansion ruins again. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I had the upper hand. Mason sat beside me sipping soda. "You know she's gonna come for you now, right?" "Let her," I said calmly. "I'm ready." And sure enough, just as the sun went down, I heard the sound of tires crunching on gravel. Karen's black SUV pulled up slow, headlights washing over the wreckage. She stepped out alone, heels clicking on the broken driveway. "Nice evening, isn't it?" she said coldly. I crossed my arms. "What do you want?" She smirked. "You really think you can stop this development? You're one man fighting an entire organization. You'll lose." "Maybe, but at least I'll take you down with it." She laughed. "You think this is personal? It's business. You should have taken the buyout like the others." "Buyout?" I repeated. "What buyout?" She tilted her head. "We offered to purchase every abandoned property around this lake. The owners all agreed except yours." I frowned. "I never got any offer." She smiled slyly. "Maybe it got lost in the mail." I stepped closer. "I've got proof of your illegal construction, Karen. Ridgeway Holdings fake permits, the whole thing." Her smile vanished for a second, then she chuckled softly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." She turned to leave, then paused and looked back. "Enjoy your ruins, Mr. Parker, because by the time the court figures anything out, this land will already belong to us." She got in her SUV and drove away. The tail lights faded into the woods. Mason came out from behind the porch. "Did she just threaten you?" "Pretty much," I said quietly. He grinned. "You know what that means, right?" I nodded. "Oh yeah, it means we hit a nerve." That night I started scanning through every frame of footage, every document, every photo. There was a pattern to how Ridgeway Holdings operated. They used HOAs to pressure residents into selling low, then bulldozed fast, claiming hazard violations before anyone could fight back. My mansion was just step one of their next big project. But I wasn't going to let them bury it or me without a fight. As the moonlight shimmered across the lake, I made a promise right there. They tore down my walls, but they were about to face something stronger: my determination. The HOA wanted to erase my mansion from the map. I was going to make sure the whole world saw what they did instead. And soon they'd learn just how far I was willing to go to take everything back. The next morning started quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl because you know something is coming. I was sitting on the steps of my ruined mansion sipping coffee when Mason pulled up his truck covered in mud. He jumped out holding a small drone controller. "You ready for this?" he said, grinning like a kid at a fair. "You got the footage?" I asked. He nodded. "Oh, I got more than footage, buddy. You're gonna love this." We went inside my half-demolished living room where my laptop was set up. The screen flickered with drone clips from the night before showing Karen meeting with men in suits at the fenced construction site. They handed her envelopes thick with cash. The drone's microphone picked up her voice, faint but clear. She said, "Make sure the paperwork clears before next week. Ridgeway wants full ownership by Friday." That was it, the smoking gun. Mason laughed low. "This woman is done." I smiled, but inside I was already planning my next move because exposing her wasn't enough. I wanted the entire operation to collapse publicly. I wanted the same cameras that watched them tear my house apart to film them facing justice. I sent copies of the footage to Dalton, our lawyer. He called me within minutes. His voice was practically shaking with excitement. "This is incredible, Parker. With this I can file a full injunction and freeze Ridgeway's assets tied to the HOA. Do what I said and make it loud." By noon the county courthouse had a press van parked outside. Dalton went on record saying the Cedar Ridge HOA and Ridgeway Holdings were under investigation for fraudulent demolition permits and land racketeering. By sunset every local news channel had the story. HOA accused of illegal demolitions. Property owners demand justice. They played clips of Karen shouting on camera. The footage Mason's drone captured rolled behind the anchors as they explained how a small lake community turned into a front for corporate greed. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors, people from nearby towns, even strangers messaged me saying they were rooting for me. Some shared similar stories: HOA harassment, sudden demolition threats, unfair fines. It was like a wall had broken and everyone was finally speaking out. But I knew Karen wasn't going down without swinging. That evening her SUV came roaring up the road again, headlights blinding. My heart pounded as she stepped out, this time flanked by two men in suits. They looked like lawyers or hired muscle, maybe both. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," she said, walking up the driveway. "No, Karen," I said calmly, "you did." She held up a thick stack of papers. "This is a cease and desist. You have no right to film private HOA operations. You're trespassing on controlled land." I smirked. "You mean my land?" One of the suits stepped forward threateningly. "Ma'am, we can handle this legally if you cooperate." I didn't flinch. I've already cooperated with the sheriff, the county, and the State Department of Environmental Protection. Karen's fake confidence started to fade. "What?" "Oh yeah," I said, "the lake you've been digging near is a protected watershed. You didn't just violate construction laws, you violated federal ones." Her face went pale for a second. Mason stepped up beside me. "I think you should leave before more cameras show up." As if on cue, I heard the distant hum of a helicopter. News chopper circling overhead, cameras pointed right at us. Karen looked up, eyes wide, realizing everything was now public. She turned back to me. "I hope you're proud of yourself. You just destroyed a community." "No," I said quietly, "you destroyed it when you sold it out for profit." She glared, then got back in her SUV, tires spinning gravel as she sped away. The suits followed, but I knew that was the last time she'd walk this property with power in her step. The next day the sheriff returned with a full investigation team. They taped off the fenced site and confiscated equipment. County officials confirmed Ridgeway Holdings had falsified multiple permits to bypass inspection. The entire project was halted indefinitely. Karen and several board members were charged with fraud and property destruction. When the news broke, the community turned on them fast. Those same neighbors who once filmed me in silence now stood outside the HOA office demanding refunds and resignations. For the first time in months I felt peace. But my mansion was still half gone and rebuilding wouldn't be cheap. That's when something unexpected happened. A week later my mailbox overflowed with letters from people all over the country. Some sent small donations, others sent notes saying my story gave them courage to stand up to their own HOAs. One even said they were lawyers offering pro bono help. I never asked for sympathy, but reading those letters reminded me why I fought, not just for my house but for everyone who'd been bullied by people like Karen. With Dalton's help I filed a civil suit for damages. The case made headlines. The judge ruled in my favor, awarding full restitution for demolition damages plus punitive fines against the HOA and Ridgeway Holdings combined. The number was enough to rebuild twice over. Mason nearly dropped his soda when I told him, "Dude, you just turned revenge into renovation money." I laughed. Maybe this place finally gets its second chance. Over the next few months crews arrived, not bulldozers this time but builders, people who respected the land. The sound of hammers replaced the sound of destruction. Slowly the mansion began to rise again, strong new beams shining in the sun. One morning I stood on the rebuilt porch overlooking the lake. The reflection of the water shimmered perfectly calm. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. Mason joined me holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Can't believe we pulled it off." "Neither can I said quietly. "You ever think about selling after all this?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not a chance. This place isn't just a house now, it's proof that they can't take everything from you." He grinned. "Well then, here's to the lake house that survived the HOA apocalypse." We laughed, but inside I felt something deeper. Not victory, not revenge, just closure. A few weeks later a county truck arrived again, but this time with new inspectors and a friendly smile. They handed me an envelope stamped with an official seal. "What's this?" I asked. The woman said, "It's your clearance certificate, Mr. Parker. The property's fully restored and recognized as independent land, not under any HOA jurisdiction ever again." I stared at her. "You mean?" She smiled. "Exactly what it means. You're free." When they drove off, I stood there in silence. The wind brushed through the pines, the lake glimmered, and I felt the weight finally lift. Karen's empire had collapsed. Ridgeway Holdings pulled out of the project entirely, facing massive fines. The rest of the HOA board resigned, and a new one was formed by actual residents, people who cared not about money but community. Sometimes I still get calls from reporters wanting an interview about the Cedar Ridge case. They ask what it felt like standing up to the HOA, and I always give the same answer. It wasn't about fighting a system, it was about reminding people that no one, no matter how powerful, can bulldoze someone's dream and get away with it. One evening months later, I walked to the edge of the dock where the lake met the horizon. The sunset painted the sky gold and red. I took a deep breath, remembering the day I first arrived here, the bulldozers, the chaos, the disbelief, and now silence, peace, and a home that finally stood strong again. Mason came up behind me holding a fishing rod. "You done brooding, or can we actually catch something this time?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Yeah, let's fish before you start talking about construction again." As we cast our lines into the calm lake, I looked at the reflection of my rebuilt mansion. The porch lights flickered on, glowing softly in the dusk. This wasn't just wood and stone anymore, it was resilience built into every wall, a reminder of how far I'd come. And as the night grew darker, I whispered quietly to myself, "Let them try again if they dare, because now I'm not the guy who bought an abandoned lake mansion, I'm the guy who rebuilt it after the HOA tried to destroy it. And this time they won't ever touch it again." The lake rippled under the moonlight, silent and endless. The world finally felt right again. I bought an abandoned lake mansion thinking I'd finally found peace, but when I showed up with paint cans and blueprints, there were bulldozers already tearing it down. I ran up yelling that it was my property, but the HOA president just smirked and said it was a community hazard. She didn't care that I had proof of ownership, she wanted it gone. Turns out she was working with a developer, secretly selling off the lakefront homes to build luxury condos. My mansion was just the first target, but I caught everything on camera, and when the news broke, her whole empire collapsed. She lost her position, got charged with fraud, and I rebuilt the same house they tried to destroy. So when I sit on my new porch watching the lake shimmer, I remember one thing: you can't bulldoze someone's dream and expect them not to rebuild stronger. Like and subscribe if you think the HOA got what they deserved.